I used to think I knew exactly where I stood with Liam. We'd been friends since freshman year. Two dorm neighbors who bonded over cheap coffee, worse Wi-Fi, and the shared terror of Intro to Stats. He was the tall, confident, athletic guy everyone liked on site. I was the quieter one, the guy who fixed printers and remembered professor office hours. He dated girls, I dated guys, and the lines were bright and simple. Or so I thought. The night everything shifted wasn't supposed to be special. It was just a Friday after a long week. My project deadline had chewed me up and spit me out, and Liam had survived a run of late nights at his internship. We did what we always did, ordered pizza we'd regret, lined up 2 beers each, and took lazy ownership of opposite corners of my couch. The city hummed outside, a low electrical buzz that seeped through the windows and made home feel like a little island. "Tell me you didn't actually say that to your boss," I said, wiping grease off my fingers. "I did," he said, grinning like a kid who'd gotten away with something. I told him if he scheduled one more 8 a.m. stand-up, my spirit was gonna unplug itself and float down the Willamette. I laughed. "That's the most Portland thing you've ever said." "Thank you," he said, tipping his beer in a mock toast. He stretched out, long legs sliding until his socked foot nudged my thigh. He didn't move it. He didn't even seem to notice. He kept talking about a guy in his office who tried to microwave fish, like a war crime but smellier, and I kept pretending that the casual contact didn't feel like a lit match on dry paper. We drifted into one of those easy silences that always feel earned. The TV murmured some forgettable movie. I found myself studying the side of his face, the way his attention softened when he zoned out, the faint scar near his jaw from a high school basketball incident, the little groove that showed when he fought a smile. He caught me looking, and there was a split second where neither of us glanced away. Then he smirked like he'd won something and returned to the movie. My crush on him wasn't new. It wasn't even particularly dramatic. It was like a song I'd turned down to background volume so I could get through my day. He'd never said anything cruel about guys like me. He just dated women and kept his lane clear. We were good. I was good. It was fine. Around midnight, he yawned and pushed himself up. "I'm dead. I might crash here. The couch awaits," I said, the line I always said. He raised an eyebrow. "Your couch gives me scoliosis, man." "My condolences." He stood, stretched again, and then, without ceremony, wandered down the hall to my bedroom. He leaned on the doorframe, looking back at me like he was waiting for me to call him out. "Your bed's got that fancy mattress topper, right? Don't act like you care," I said, trying to sound bored instead of hyper-aware. He disappeared into my room. I followed, because, of course I did. We'd shared a bed plenty of times, on trips, after parties, on nights when the couch was full of jackets and bad decisions. It didn't mean anything. That's what I told myself as I tossed him a spare pillow. He flopped onto the left side automatically, like we always did. I took the right, facing the wall. We lay there, both on our backs, hands folded on our stomachs like we'd been posed by the same mannequin artist. The streetlight outside wrote faint stripes on the ceiling. I could feel the heat from him across the small distance, a kind of low thrum, like the air itself had opinions. After a while, he said, "You ever think about just not doing any of it for a week? No deadlines, no gym, no pretending to like Connor from marketing?" "Connor's fine," I said. "He just talks like a podcast." Liam snorted. "Exactly." Silence again. The good kind. My breathing synced itself to his, and somewhere in there, the edges of the day softened and went dark. I woke up to wait. Not the scary kind, not panic. Just a gentle, unmistakable pressure on my chest and the warmth of a body too close to be an accident. It took my eyes a second to catch up. The room was dim, the charcoal glow of 2 a.m., and in that haze, I realized Liam had slid closer. His arm was draped over me, his hand resting light against my ribcage. His breath found the hollow beneath my ear, slow and steady. I froze, every nerve waking up at once. Maybe he's asleep, I thought. People move in their sleep. This could be nothing. My heart, unhelpful, decided to kick a hole through my ribs. Then his thumb moved, barely. A small brush across my t-shirt, like he was testing the fabric or the shape beneath it. It wasn't thoughtless, it wasn't random, it was careful. I kept still, the way you do when a shy animal decides to come close. I didn't want to spook the moment, didn't want to fix it or name it and watch it disappear. I could feel the heat of him at my side, the way his chest pressed lightly against my arm with each breath. A part of me wanted to say something stupid and deflect. A bigger part of me wanted to see where his next move went. He tightened his arm by a fraction, drawing himself closer until his shoulder brushed my jaw. The clean smell of his laundry detergent mixed with something warmer, something him. The city hummed outside. My mind did that contradictory thing, spinning fast while feeling weirdly calm like a storm that chose to move in slow motion. I thought about the versions of him I'd collected over the years. Liam in a graduation gown with a crooked tie, Liam holding a flat-packed IKEA box like it was an enemy he'd bested, Liam drunk at a Halloween party, fake vampire teeth in, laughing so hard he had to sit on the floor. None of those versions had ever been this one. Quiet, tentative, vulnerable, close. His voice when it came was low and rough around the edges. "You awake?" I didn't answer right away. I watched the faint blue bar shift across the ceiling. I felt the weight of his hand, steady and warmer than the rest of me. The question wasn't about sleep, and we both knew it. It was a permission slip disguised as small talk. "Yeah," I said finally, my voice softer than I meant. His breath hitched just once. He didn't move away. If anything, the stillness sharpened, like time zoomed in and balanced on the point of a pin. "Okay," he said, and the word was full of meanings I couldn't untangle fast enough. My brain sprinted through possibilities. Maybe he was sorting something out he hadn't named yet. Maybe this was a one-time experiment he'd wake up from and file under "Do not repeat." Maybe he'd pull back, laugh it off, and we'd never speak of it again. My chest tightened at that last thought in a way that told me more truth than I wanted. "You good?" he asked. It should have been easy to say yes. In the catalog of bad ideas, letting your straight best friend hold you at 2 a.m. ranks high. But the feeling of his forearm across me, the quiet way he'd asked, like he cared how I felt before he cared about his own confusion, made something inside me go very still. "I'm good," I said. He exhaled. The tiny tension in his body eased. He shifted just enough to rest his chin near my shoulder, and his thumb traced a barely there line over my shirt again, like he was memorizing a map he didn't know he'd need. The touch wasn't sexual, not yet. It was careful and exploratory and so much more intimate than I knew what to do with. "You ever—" He stopped, like the sentence had a cliff in the middle of it. "Forget it." "What?" I said, a whisper. "Just thinking out loud," he said, and I felt the almost smile against my skin. Dangerous habit. I wanted to ask him 100 things. I wanted to ask what had changed. I wanted to ask if he'd been carrying this curiosity alone, like I had my feelings. I wanted to hold on to the moment without scaring it off. So I did the one thing that felt right. I slid my hand just a little, enough to rest my fingers over his where they lay on my chest. A light touch. A yes. He stilled. Then, slowly, he curled his fingers so our hands fit together. We lay like that for a long time, long enough for the edges of my panic to soften, long enough for the air to feel like normal air again. The city outside did what it always does. Somewhere in the building, a pipe clanked. Liam's breathing steadied into that near-sleep rhythm again, though I knew he was awake because every few minutes his thumb would make that quiet arc, like a heartbeat on my skin. I thought, if this is all it is, if it never becomes anything else, if tomorrow he calls it weird and we laugh and move on, will I still be glad it happened? Yes, I already was. Eventually, he shifted enough that his lips brushed the shell of my ear, a light, almost accidental contact that made my pulse trip. He didn't apologize. He didn't make a joke. He just stayed there, close enough that I could feel the word form before he spoke it. "You awake?" he asked again, even quieter, like the answer might be different this time. I don't know how long we stayed like that. His forehead pressed to my shoulder, my arm lying still at my side like I was afraid to spook him. The streetlight outside buzzed faintly, a low hum that filled the gaps between our breaths. Then, slowly, almost cautiously, his fingers moved. They didn't slide far, just traced a small, deliberate arc over my shirt, right along the edge of my ribs. It was such a small touch, but it sent a ripple all the way down my spine. "Liam," I said quietly. Not sure if it was meant to be a warning, a question, or a plea. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he shifted again, his chest pressed fully against my back now. "You're warm," he murmured, like it was an observation he couldn't keep to himself. "I'm also awake," I said, my voice low. "I know." That should have been my cue to ask him what the hell was going on. But there was something in the way he said it, calm, unhurried, almost sure of himself, that made me bite back the question. Instead, I let the silence stretch. His hand settled flat against my stomach, and the weight of it made my heart thud so hard I was sure he could feel it. I could smell the faint trace of his soap, the same kind he'd used since freshman year, mixed with something warmer, skin and heat, and the slightest hint of beer. I turned slightly so I could see his face in the dim light. His eyes were open, fixed on me, and for once there was no smirk, no teasing edge, just that same unreadable focus from earlier, the kind that made me feel like he was trying to memorize every detail. "This doesn't freak you out?" he asked. "No," I said, and I meant it. He nodded once, almost like he'd been expecting that answer. Then, without breaking eye contact, his thumb moved again, brushing over the hem of my shirt, his knuckles grazing bare skin this time. The touch was tentative, testing, but it set my nerves alight. I swallowed hard. "You're not drunk enough to blame this on alcohol tomorrow." A faint smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Good!" That one word hung in the air between us, heavier than anything else we'd said tonight. I didn't move away when his hand slipped a little higher, fingertips resting against my skin. The heat of his palm was steady, grounding, and my own hand moved almost without permission, covering his, holding it there. For the first time in years of friendship, there was no pretending, no carefully drawn line. Just the quiet, impossible fact that Liam was here, touching me like he'd wanted to for a long time. And I was letting him. His hand stayed under mine, still against my skin, like we were both testing how far we could go without tipping this into something we couldn't take back. I could hear the faint shift of the blanket when he exhaled. You ever think about how sometimes you just know something, but you don't let yourself admit it? I tilted my head toward him. "What are we talking about? Feelings or your terrible taste in music?" He smirked just barely, but didn't let me derail him. "Feelings," he said, the word sounding heavier than it should. I stayed quiet. I wanted him to keep talking. "I guess I've been trying not to think about it for a while," he went on, "because it didn't make sense. You're my best friend and you're..." He stopped, swallowing the rest of the sentence. "I'm what?" His eyes flicked to mine, almost challenging me to make it easier for him. "You know." "I'd rather hear you say it." His jaw flexed, like the words were caught somewhere between his chest and his mouth. "You're the guy I first think about when I'm alone," he finally said, his voice low but clear. That sentence felt like it reached into my ribs and curled around my heart. I didn't trust myself to speak right away, so I just looked at him. The dim light from the street lamp cut a pale line across his face, catching the edge of his cheekbone. I thought about all the times I'd caught him looking at me over the years, times I'd written off as accidents or misread moments. All of them lined up in my head now like a row of quiet confessions I'd been too blind to notice. "You're not imagining this," he said suddenly, almost like he'd read my mind. "I've wanted this. For longer than I'd admit." He shifted closer, our knees brushing under the blanket. "I don't know what it means. I don't even know what happens after tonight. But I don't want to pretend I don't feel it anymore." My throat tightened. "Then don't." The corner of his mouth lifted, half relief, half something I couldn't name, and then he leaned in. Not all the way, not yet, but enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath when he spoke again. "I didn't know if you'd want me like that," he whispered. I almost laughed, but it came out softer, breathier. "You have no idea." That was all it took for him to close the space between us, his lips brushing mine in the faintest, quickest contact, like a test. My chest felt too small for the rush of air I pulled in. We stayed there, just barely apart, his forehead resting against mine. "If we do this," he murmured, "there's no going back to how it was." "Maybe I don't want to go back," I said. His smile deepened just enough for me to feel it before his mouth found mine again, slower, more certain this time. His hands slid up from my stomach to my chest, and I pressed closer without thinking. Everything we'd kept in check for years broke surface in that moment, quiet but undeniable. That second kiss didn't end so much as change, his lips moving against mine with more intent, the years of hesitation between us burning away like paper. I felt his hand slip to the back of my neck, his fingers threading into my hair as he pulled me closer. My own hand found his hip under the blanket, the heat of him startling even through the thin fabric of his sweatpants. He made a quiet sound into my mouth, a soft hum that made my stomach flip. When we finally broke apart for air, he stayed close, his forehead resting against mine. "I've thought about this," he said, breathless but steady. "More than I probably should have." I smiled faintly. "You and me both." He let out a small laugh, almost shy, and then his hand trailed down my chest again, this time slipping under my shirt without hesitation. His palm was warm against my skin, his fingertips skimming over my ribs like he was mapping me. I caught his wrist gently. "You're sure about this?" I asked, not because I wanted him to stop, but because I needed to hear it. He met my eyes, no hesitation in his voice. "Yeah, I've never been more sure about anything." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. All the nervousness I'd been carrying dissolved into a kind of grounded, buzzing warmth. I let go of his wrist, and his hand flattened over my chest, feeling my heartbeat. "That's fast," he teased, a quiet smirk on his lips. "Wonder why?" I shot back, and he laughed again before leaning in to kiss me harder this time. The blanket shifted as he moved closer, our legs tangling together. His knee brushed up against my thigh, and I could feel the tension in his body, that edge between wanting and not knowing exactly where the line was anymore. I decided to help him cross it, my fingers slipping under the hem of his shirt, tracing the firm line of muscle along his side. He sucked in a breath, his eyes fluttering shut briefly before he caught my mouth again. The kiss deepened, less careful now, like we'd both accepted that whatever this was, it wasn't going to be undone. His hands were everywhere. My jaw, my shoulder, my waist, each touch deliberate and almost hungry. At one point, he pulled back just enough to look at me. "You have no idea how long I've wanted to do this," I grinned, brushing my thumb along his jaw. "Guess we're making up for lost time." And just like that, his mouth was back on mine, his hands sliding lower, anchoring me against him like he was afraid I'd disappear. The shift from teasing to something heavier happened so quickly I barely registered it. 1 second we were kissing like we had all night to take it slow, and the next Liam had rolled half on top of me, the weight of him pinning me into the mattress. His hand slid under my shirt again, but this time it didn't stop at my ribs. His palm pressed flat against my stomach, then moved upward, tracing the line to my chest. The warmth of his skin against mine made my breath hitch. "Still good?" he asked, his voice low, almost rough. "Yeah," I said without hesitation. He smiled, small, quick, and then leaned down to kiss me again. Slower this time, but deeper. His tongue brushed mine, sending a rush of heat straight through me. My hands found his back, sliding under his shirt to feel the solid muscle there. He let out a quiet groan into my mouth, and I swear I felt it all the way down my spine. The blanket had twisted halfway off us, and the cool air of the room contrasted with the heat radiating from his body. His thigh pressed between mine, and I felt him shift against me in a way that left no room for misunderstanding. "Liam," I breathed, not even sure what I was going to say after his name. He pulled back just enough to meet my eyes, his face close enough that our noses brushed. "I want to keep going," he said, voice steady, "but only if you do too." I didn't answer with words. I reached for the hem of his shirt and tugged it upward, and he didn't resist. In a second, it was off, tossed somewhere at the foot of the bed. The sight of him, bare-chested, skin warm and flushed, hit me harder than I expected. He caught me looking and smirked, but it wasn't cocky. It was almost shy, like he wasn't used to being seen like this. I slid my hands over his chest, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing, the heat of him under my palms. He bent to kiss me again, but this time it was slower, almost reverent, like he was memorizing the moment. When his hand slid lower, fingers grazing the waistband of my shorts, my pulse kicked hard enough that he must have felt it. He paused, searching my face. "Okay?" "More than okay," I said. The way his eyes darkened at that answer sent another rush through me. His hand slipped under the waistband, and I felt his touch, warm, deliberate, and so different from anything I'd imagined in the countless times I'd let myself think about him like this. I exhaled hard, my hand tightening on his shoulder. His mouth found my neck, leaving slow, deliberate kisses that made it impossible to think about anything else. Every bit of space that had ever existed between us was gone. Whatever thin thread of restraint had been holding us back snapped the second his mouth found that spot, just below my jaw. I let out a sound I didn't mean to, low and rough, and I felt his lips curve into a small, satisfied smile against my skin. His hand kept moving, slow but certain, and the sensation pulled a sharp breath from me. He shifted his weight, bracing himself over me so we were chest to chest, skin to skin, the heat between us impossible to ignore. The muscles in his back flexed under my hands as I slid them lower, feeling him tense and then relax with every touch. "You have no idea," he murmured again, his voice right in my ear, "how many times I've thought about this. About you. Guess you'll have to show me," I said, and that was it. He kissed me hard, almost desperate now, his hand gripping my hip as if anchoring himself there. The rhythm between us built quickly, fueled by every look, every sound, every unspoken thing we'd buried for years. His breathing was ragged, matching mine, and every time he shifted closer, it was like my body couldn't tell where his ended and mine began. When his forehead pressed to mine again, both of us gasping for air, I realized my hands were shaking, not from nerves, but from how much I wanted him here, now, without any more pauses or questions. And he must have seen it because he smiled, soft, certain, and whispered, "I've got you." The rest blurred into heat and movement, into the press of his hands and the sound of my name on his lips. Time stopped mattering. All that existed was the two of us, finally giving in to something we'd both carried for far too long. When it was over, he didn't pull away. He stayed there, breathing slow, his arm draped over me like it belonged there. "You okay?" he asked quietly. "Better than okay," I said, and it was the truth. He smiled against my shoulder. "Good, because I'm not sleeping on the couch anymore." I laughed, the sound low in the quiet room, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to pretend with him. Whatever we were now, it was real, and I wasn't letting it go.